The Biden administration is lifting some Trump-era restrictions on Cuba. Now, the White House had said it would get tough on the communist nation following a government crackdown there against the pro-democracy demonstrations over the past year. 10 Tampa Bay's Eric Lasser has a closer look at this new policy and why it's a concern for many here in the Bay Area.
Tampa is home to the third largest population of Cuban Americans in the United States. So last summer, when pro-democracy demonstrators took to the streets of Havana, Cuban Americans showed their support by doing the same here. But over the past few months, demonstrations in Cuba have been silenced. Internet communication shut down. The Biden administration, which had talked tough, is seeing an unprecedented wave of Cuban immigrants making their way to the U.S. border. And so they've decided to end some Trump-era restrictions that they say are hurting Cuban citizens.
After 40 years of this, it weighs heavily on my life.
Tampa attorney Ralph Fernandez saw his family flee Cuba when he was just 8. He says decades of shifting U.S. policy have shown it doesn't really matter.
You cannot choke a regime until the people within that regime are willing to die for their freedom.
The Biden plan is not quite a return to the more open policy of the Obama administration, but it will allow those with relatives in Cuba to visit with fewer restrictions. Groups and those traveling for educational purposes will face fewer hurdles. And soon, commercial and charter flights will be allowed to resume to cities other than Havana.
The way you stand for freedom.
Many of Florida's top Republicans were quick to criticize the relaxed policy, including Governor Ron DeSantis.
The minute you're sending more of this to the island, that's going right into the pocket of the Cuban dictatorship.
Of particular interest to Cuban Americans here in the Tampa Bay area, the change in policy also reinstates the Family Reunification Program, easing a visa backlog of more than 20,000 Cubans trying to immigrate to the U.S. legally. The administration says its policies are aimed at providing assistance directly to the Cuban people, bypassing the communist government.
And while the policy change likely means that Americans will be able to book tours again to Cuba, no word yet on whether airlines or cruise ships will consider resuming service, which had been abruptly stopped by the Trump administration.